It started as a regular trip to the supermarket. I had a list, a cart, and a mission: grab some dog food and get out. But as fate would have it, some people just can't help themselves. As I stood in line at the checkout, a woman behind me glanced at my cart and, with the curiosity of someone who had never seen a bag of dog food before, asked, "Oh, do you have a dog?" Now, any normal person would have just said yes and moved on, but where's the fun in that? So, with a completely straight face, I turned to her and said, "No, actually, it's for me. I'm going back on the happy dog diet." She blinked, hard. I could see the wheels turning in her head, but before she could say anything, I doubled down. "Yeah, I've done it before. It works wonders. You just fill your pockets with kibble, and every time you feel hungry, you eat a few pieces. Full of nutrients, keeps you feeling satisfied, and honestly, it's not that bad." By now, the entire checkout line had gone silent. Even the cashier had stopped scanning items. Everyone was listening. The woman's eyes widened. "But isn't that dangerous?" she asked. I sighed dramatically. "Well, kind of. Last time I tried it, I lost over 40 pounds, but I also woke up in the ICU with tubes sticking out of me." She gasped. "Oh my God, from poisoning?" I shook my head. "No, I sniffed out a poodle in heat, and while I was chasing her across the road, I got hit by a car." A man walked into a supermarket, grabbed a bag of dog food, and headed to the checkout. As he placed it on the counter, the cashier shook her head. "Sorry, sir. Store policy says you need to bring your pet with you if you want to buy pet food." The man frowned. "What? That's ridiculous. I don't make the rules." The cashier shrugged. Muttering under his breath, the man stormed out, leaving the bag behind. The next day, he returned, this time with a bag of cat food. He plopped it onto the counter, giving the cashier a defiant look. The cashier sighed. "Sir, you need to bring your cat if you want to buy cat food. Store policy." His face turned red. "Are you kidding me? What kind of nonsense is this?" He said, but rules were rules, and once again he left empty-handed. On the third day, he marched into the store carrying a small plastic bag. He walked up to the same cashier, a mischievous grin on his face. "I'd like to buy a pack of toilet paper." The cashier blinked. Okay?" The man held up the plastic bag. "Before we go any further, though, could you just stick your hand inside this bag?" The cashier hesitated, but, curious, reached in. A second later, she made a face. "Ugh, what is this? It's warm. And kind of weird." The man smirked. "Yeah, so about that toilet paper." An employee at the local grocery store was primarily responsible for keeping frozen goods well stocked. At first, he only had a few items to manage, such as bagged ice, frozen pizza, and ice cream. However, as time went by, he found that his daily to-do list from management was getting longer and longer, sometimes even including things outside the frozen section. At his breaking point, he went to his manager to complain about the unfair treatment and to state his grievances. He demanded that something had to be done. The next day, he saw his to-do list and was profoundly relieved. He had finally received just ice. Two friends bumped into each other at the neighborhood supermarket. "Fancy meeting you here," one said, grabbing a shopping basket. They strolled through the aisles together, chatting about life, kids, and, of course, husbands. Eventually, they made their way to the checkout. As one of the women reached into her purse to find her wallet, she started pulling out all sorts of random items: lipstick, receipts, a pack of tissues, and a TV remote. Her friend raised an eyebrow. "Do you always bring the remote when you go shopping?" she asked, laughing. The woman smirked. "No, but let me tell you why it's here." She leaned in conspiratorially. "Before I left, I asked my husband if he wanted to come shopping with me. He said no. Then I asked if I could take the car, and he sighed and said, 'As long as you leave me the TV, you can take whatever you want and just go.'" Her friend chuckled. "So, you took the remote?" The woman grinned. "Not just that. I switched the TV to the fashion channel first. I told him he had nothing to worry about." Carolyn, a rich blonde, buys a new automatic Jaguar XKR Sport. She drives the car perfectly well during the day, but at night the car just won't move at all. After trying to drive the car at night for a week, but without any luck, she furiously calls the Jaguar dealers, and they send out a technician to her. The technician examines the car and finds nothing wrong with it, so he turns to the blonde and asks, "Ma'am, are you sure you are using the right gears?" Full of anger, the blonde replies, "How on earth you could ask such a question? I'm not stupid, you know. Of course I am using the right gears. I use D during the day and N at night." A man strolled into the supermarket, blissfully unaware that his zipper was wide open. As he browsed the aisles, a young female cashier walked up to him with a polite but amused smile. "Sir, your barracks door is open." The man frowned, slightly confused. "Barracks door?" he muttered under his breath. That wasn't exactly everyday vocabulary, so he simply nodded, thanked her, and continued shopping, still unsure what she meant. A few minutes later, another shopper, a middle-aged man, passed by and whispered, "Hey, buddy, your fly's open." Realization struck. Oh, mortified, he quickly zipped up his pants and chuckled to himself. At least now he understood what the cashier had been talking about. Still, he couldn't resist having a little fun. When it was time to check out, he made sure to get in the young woman's line. As she rang up his items, he leaned in slightly and grinned. So, earlier, when you mentioned my barracks door was open, did you happen to see a soldier standing at attention? The young woman paused for a moment, then looked him square in the eye and replied, "No, sir, but I did see a disabled veteran sitting on a couple of old duffel bags." The other day, my wife texted me while I was at work. "We're having salad for dinner. Can you grab a head of lettuce on your way home?" Seemed simple enough. On my way back, I decided to check out that new discount supermarket that had just opened off the highway. I figured I'd save a few bucks and see what all the fuss was about. The moment I walked in, I realized this place was not a normal supermarket. It was wholesale madness. Everything came in giant boxes, crates of cereal, industrial-sized tubs of peanut butter, and enough toilet paper to survive an apocalypse. But I only needed a single head of lettuce. I found a massive box stacked high with them, picked one out, and headed to the checkout. The cashier, a young woman with a blank expression, looked at the lettuce, then at me. "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't sell you that." I frowned. "Why not?" "Well, sir, we only sell the entire box." I blinked. "The entire box?" She nodded. "That's right. You can either take the whole box or put that one back." I turned and looked at the towering crate. "There must be over 100 heads in there." 144, sir." I stared at her, utterly dumbfounded. "You mean to tell me I have to buy 144 heads of lettuce just to get one? That's absurd. Who would need that much?" By this point, I was so frustrated that I just left the lettuce on the counter. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "This is the worst supermarket I've ever seen." Without missing a beat, she shook her head and replied, "Oh, we're not a supermarket, sir. We're a grocery store." A married couple, carefully watching their budget, walked into the supermarket one evening. With their grocery list in hand, they navigated the aisles, determined to stick to only the essentials. As they passed the beverage section, the husband's eyes lit up. He reached for a case of beer and casually placed it in the shopping cart. His wife stopped in her tracks. "Put that back," she scolded. "We're on a budget, and we can't afford luxuries like beer. That's $20. Sighing, the husband reluctantly lifted the case out of the cart and placed it back on the shelf. They continued shopping in silence. A little while later, they wandered into the cosmetics aisle. The wife picked up a small jar of beauty cream and, without hesitation, placed it in the cart. The husband raised an eyebrow. "Wait a second, I thought we were only buying essentials." His wife huffed. "This is essential. It makes me look beautiful." The husband smirked. "Well, the beer does that too, and it's half the price." Security later reported that a man had been found unconscious in the cosmetics aisle, mysteriously struck by a flying jar of beauty cream. This morning, at exactly 7:45, I found myself in a long line outside the grocery store. It was one of those early-hour specials, open from 8 a.m., exclusively for senior citizens. The line was orderly but determined, filled with elderly shoppers gripping their carts like warriors ready for battle. Out of nowhere, a young man came striding in from the parking lot and tried to cut in at the front of the line. Big mistake. Before he could even open his mouth, an old lady swung her cane like a medieval knight and sent him stumbling backward. He barely managed to stay on his feet. A moment later, he dusted himself off, took a deep breath, and tried again. This time, an old man stepped forward, threw a swift punch to his gut, and followed up with a precise kick, sending him tumbling onto the pavement. The young man groaned, rolling onto his back, staring at the sky. But he wasn't giving up. He crawled back toward the line for a third time, hands raised in surrender. "Look," he panted, exasperated. "If you don't let me unlock the damn door, none of you are getting in!" A husband and wife were making their usual rounds at the local grocery store, sticking to their budget, or at least trying to. As they passed the beer aisle, the husband's eyes lit up. He reached for a case of Budweiser, grinning as he placed it in the cart. His wife stopped in her tracks. "What do you think you're doing?" she asked, arms crossed. "It's on sale. Only $10 for 24 cans, he said proudly. She shook her head. "Put it back. We can't afford it." With a sigh, he lifted the case out of the cart and placed it back on the shelf, casting one last longing glance at it before they moved on. A few aisles later, as they reached the beauty section, the wife picked up a small jar of face cream and casually dropped it into the cart. The husband glanced at the price. $20. "Hold on," he said. "What do you think you're doing?" "This is my face cream," she replied matter-of-factly. "It makes me look beautiful." The husband smirked. "So does 24 cans of Budweiser, and it's half the price." After finishing my shopping, I got in line behind an older woman who kept glancing at me. "I'm sorry," she said. "You remind me of my daughter. I lost her in a car accident." Feeling bad, I offered my condolences. As she was leaving, she asked, "Would you say goodbye, Mom, for me?" I nodded. "Goodbye, Mom." The cashier finished ringing me up, but my total was way too high. "Why so much?" I asked. "Your mom said you'd cover her groceries." So I ran outside, tackled the woman, and grabbed her leg, and just like I'm pulling yours.